Good morning, good afternoon, good day. It's Roger Roadside here saying hello. Hello. As you can see, a very lovely, overcast and grey, typical UK day. This is a bit of it's a difficult one to talk about, but you may have seen it in the news recently that the last hostage has now been returned, or the last hostage body has now been returned to Israel, which now, to some certain extent, closes a chapter, or closes the last page of a chapter, with regards to having everyone returned. It's a difficult one to talk about because if you just take the view or if you discuss the terrible atrocity that happened at that music event, at that music festival, and the hundreds of innocent people that lost their lives, who were just people like you and I. They weren't necessarily people who had extreme right thoughts or extreme left thoughts or whatever. They weren't necessarily people that hated a class of people or hated a certain people that maybe had different religious beliefs or anything like that. They were just people like you and I, and they lost their lives on that day, and that in itself was a tragic event, and I believe it to be a tragic event. But then you get some who say, well, what about the decades of oppression and whatnot from on the Gaza side? And there's elements of that I understand, and that don't get me wrong. Before I go any further, look, I am not an absolute expert, and I wouldn't say that I know the centuries of history, but I do know that the toing and froing is complex, and I know that if you ask one side, their story is somewhat different to the story of the other side. So that's what makes it very complicated and very difficult to distinctly choose a side. I think I am always and forever on the side of no innocent person ever deserves to die at the hands of someone else, in regards to making a statement or anything like that, especially like that. So yeah, it's a really difficult one. I give my condolences and give my thoughts to the families that lost people throughout the attacks on Gaza, where Israel was trying to stamp out Hamas. Any innocent Palestinians, or it's a very unpleasant situation when you've got a terrorist group that's using your community and your people as human shields. And no doubt there were people on the Palestinian side, on the Gaza side, who lost their lives, and they were innocent as well. So again, for them, my thoughts and condolences are with you. And look, there's no winners in this situation, and I don't think there will ever be a winner in this situation. I don't know what the Roger Roadside doesn't know the answer. Well, of course. I mean, there's plenty of people much smarter than me that have tried to figure out how to solve the conflict between Israel and Gaza. The people, and for any certain point in time, I could not profess to even know or to have even a small inkling of how you might solve that situation. But I dare say that if and when it does actually get solved, I would I would most likely assume that there are probably going to be people on both sides who won't necessarily walk away from that thinking that they've 100% won. I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where anyone 100% wins in this conflict, and that's a sad truth. Now, so with that in mind, I guess my feeling is this: I don't necessarily, and again, look, this is my personal opinion. I don't necessarily think that it's right to not acknowledge a terrible and tragic situation purely based on history of certain things. Like, for example, if I don't know, just as a hypothetical, if Germany got, if parts of Germany got bombed tomorrow, I wouldn't, and people lost their lives and it was a terrible situation. Would it be right for me to say, oh, well, they deserved it because, back in the 40s, less than 100 years ago, we know what they were doing. So it's rooted in that, and that's where that comes from. That's just retaliation. What about the amount of people that they killed? Does that make sense? I don't necessarily think it's fair to, and again, this is just my opinion, so don't sue me, bro, but I just don't think it's fair to not acknowledge the terrible situation that's happened. And if there is another terrible situation that's going on, and that has been going on, then I think there are ways to shed light on those. But it kind of felt like when that terrible attack happened, immediately, the next day there were demonstrations and protests and stuff out in the streets, obviously erring on the side of Palestinians and those in Gaza. And it just didn't seem as though it just seemed a massive tit for tat. And when arguments and cases can be made on both sides, obviously you get one side that says the other side are killing people and they're taking joy in it, and they're doing it for fun and they're being evil and this, that and the other. And then the other side comes out and says that the other side's doing that. At the end of the day, there's either truth in some of the things that people said, or all of the things that people said, or perhaps there's things that people said that were embellished to try and garner more backing to the side that they have obviously nailed their flag to. So I just don't think that there's, I don't know, again, it's a very difficult one, but I think in hindsight, if the atrocities that came out of that event were premeditated from the way in which people were being treated and stuff like that, then I understand that. Were the people that attacked that were attacked and that lost their lives? I guess the question is were the people that were attacked and that lost their lives, and even the gentleman whose final remains were given back today, of all the people that lost their lives and were injured and lost loved ones, and everyone that sort of fits underneath that umbrella, were all of them directly involved in the manner in which Gaza was treated? Like, did they have a say? Did they have something that they did in regards to whatever this treatment was? And was it them directly, or were they just made an example of? And if they were made an example of, well then, I'm sorry, but if you say that someone is being vicious to you and terrible to you, and then you go out and do something vicious and terrible, for me personally, it's hard for me to warrant, you know, the actions that you've taken, unless they were, you know, if they were out of survival, if it was a case that, you know, what was going on in Gaza was so oppressive and so terrible that you know, 100 IDF soldiers who were on the boundaries, policing and you know, being the dictators and stuff like that, if they lost their lives whilst you were trying to get free or whatever the case may be, then, you know, that's a slightly different kettle of fish. When you're parachuting into an event that, you know, for all you got to remember as well, they parachuted into that event. Not everyone there was from Israel, and the acts, and it's not they didn't just kill. They did a lot of horrendous, horrible, inhumane things. And again, it was to people that weren't necessarily, you know, you could, I guess, easily argue, weren't actually directly involved in any decisions or you know, anything to do with what was going on. So again, I think the thing I've learnt from this situation is, and you know, it goes back to Black Lives Matter. It goes back to Black Lives Matter. You know, that situation that caused riots around the world, that caused absolute outcries. You know, it was a massive bandwagon that a lot of people, thousands, jumped on. Not just black people, but everyone. You know, there was a lot of people that jumped on that bandwagon. And what's happened since? What have we found out since in regards to the movement of Black Lives Matter, the actual institution of it, the one that raised so many funds? Did that situation go into? Did Black Lives Matter go on to invest that money into communities, into police awareness, into you know, cultural awareness programs? No, they've been done for corruption or things like that. So I guess the only thing I would say, and again, this is just my opinion, you can take it or leave it, but whenever a situation happens like this, I think it's very easy to be really reactionary to it, and it's very easy to perhaps believe the first reports that have come out, and it's very easy to just believe that that's factual and that's correct, and then it's very easy for people to get really riled up about that. You know, it's the same thing here in the UK. You know, when you've got situations whereby, you know, immigration is a really, really touchy subject at the moment, and has been for probably at least the last 5 years or so. And with the, you know, with letting in so many undocumented people, as soon as there is an attack on someone that is, and the perpetrator is someone that's not from a British sort of background, or indigenous British, or, you know, doesn't have a surname of Smith, you know, there has been times where, you know, within the UK, people have jumped to action and been called to arms, you know, immediately following a situation. And again, it hasn't always been the appropriate thing to do, and it's come out after the fact that you know, it wasn't XYZ or ABC. So I guess my point is, in my opinion, I would like us, I would, I guess, adopt, even for myself personally, and this is just for me personally, I would like to adopt a more laid back, sort of accumulate facts and really consider both sides of all arguments that are coming out before I then, you know, form an opinion, or at least form an opinion that becomes unwavering, or is a, you know, is a strong belief. and I don't think that gets done as much these days as perhaps what it might have been done in the past. And look, that might just be because there's so many more routes to market with regards to news. There's so many more routes to market with regards to people's opinion. I mean, even this channel as myself, who am I? I'm no one. I'm just a guy who drives around in a car. But if I was on here and I was saying, oh look, there's another bloody grey Fiat that's there on the left. Oh, bloody grey Fiats, they're terrible, they're hopeless. And then, whoever, the three people that watch this video then start going on and going, oh yeah, bloody grey Fiats are terrible. We obviously live in a day and age where someone whose opinions, are questionable, I don't know about Fiats really. I've never driven a Fiat. I've never studied them. I've never tried to buy one. I couldn't tell you anything about a Fiat. So I guess what I'm saying is that my opinion is unfounded. And it's who's to say if my opinion is great or not. Anyway, long story short, I'm waffling a little bit, but I just wanted to mark the occasion. Obviously a somber occasion. I did want to address the situation. It's a very difficult situation. It's a very difficult topic. There's a lot of people that have very confirmed views and ingrained views on things. I'm a little bit on the fence with things. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on something, so therefore, if I'm not an expert on the situation and also the history, then how could I possibly say that my beliefs are concrete? I couldn't, because I don't really know. However, the only thing I would say is I know that I 100% don't believe in people innocently losing their lives, and especially just as a way to make a statement. So in that regard, and in regards to this event that happened, it's hopefully now something that Israel, in regards to getting all the hostages and the bodies home, hopefully now they can begin to heal from that situation. But there's obviously a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done on that whole situation as a whole, to really try to fix it. But so I just wanted to say that. Look, if there's any comments that you want to put in the comments below, please feel free to. Obviously, remember that this is just an opinion. I'm not a journalist or anything. I believe that both sides, Israel and those in Gaza, or those that are affected, I think there's terrible decisions that have been made on both sides. Look, I'd be interested to get your thoughts. Obviously, the only thing I would say is, if you are going to take the time to write a comment, I just don't be vicious, don't be vile, don't be demeaning or anything like that. Just regardless of what side you're on or what you believe, just know that there's potentially other people who have been terribly affected by this situation on both sides. So regardless of which side you're on, just know that there's people on both sides that have been affected, and we should give our thoughts and our respect to those that have been directly affected on both sides. And we hope and pray for a resolution at some point. Like I said, hopefully we as a society and we as a group of animals on this planet can share a commonality in the sense of forming an opinion once we've got all the facts together, and trying to sort of block out those who are potentially trying to drum up trouble. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Listen, thank you very much for your support. Thank you very much for subscribing. Thank you very, very much for liking stuff. And oh look, Starbug won. Now, listen, I am a massive Red Dwarf fan. Anyone who's made it this long, thank you for sticking it out. I'm a massive Red Dwarf fan. So seeing Starbug 1 is a very cool thing. But there you go. Listen, this is Roger Roadside saying ciao for now. Bye-bye.